You're listening to The Bon Ray Show. It's 8 in the evening. Tune in every night at 8 to listen to The Bon Ray Show on Irish News Radio or ITV. News Radio. Today we're talking to a very interesting man all the way from America. My first American call. His name is Dave Bailey. Very interesting character. Wrote a book after 9/11, after the shock of 9/11, and has been finding his way through Islam and being shocked and horrified of what governments around the world are bringing into us in their so-called diversity. Welcome, Dave. How are you today?
Doing wonderful.
What's the story with Trump at the moment? What's happening with him? How does he, he seems to have all gone quiet at the moment.
Well, it's a very interesting thing with President Trump right now. As you know, he got elected basically on a nationalist platform. He wanted to put America first and restrict immigration, particularly from Islamic nations that had a lot of terrorists running over the whole country. And he figured, we don't want people coming in from these countries that are just teeming with terrorists. And
absolutely. He's a fantastic leader.
Yes. But he's done one thing very recently, which personally I find very concerning, which is the murder of the journalist Kashoggie by operatives very high levels in the Saudi Arabian government who answer directly to MBS, who is the crown prince. And President Trump has just recently stood with the crown prince, and he has very good strategic reasons for wanting to do that in opposing Iran, which is a very real threat. But it really highlights one of the fundamental problems that we've got, which is we keep looking for some good guy somewhere in the Islamic world that we can ally with to oppose other Islamic countries that are threats. And the horrible, awful truth is there are no good guys in the Islamic world with whom we can safely ally. And we found that way back with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, when, after the American hostage crisis of 1979, where the Iranians were holding all these 52 hostages, we wanted to use Iraq as a way to punish Iran. They got into a war, or Iraq and Iran got into a war, and we decided we'll support Iraq as a way to work against the Iranian government, which had done so much damage to the United States. Well, we all know how that turned out. Saddam Hussein turned out to be a despotic criminal guy using gas, killing thousands of his own people. And, we took the fall for that. Later, when we were in Afghanistan, using the Mujahideen to oppose the Soviet Union and their puppet government that was established there. Well, we thought that was a great idea, and then lo and behold, Osama bin Laden, who was one of the people that we actually worked with to chase out the Soviets, turned around and decided to attack the United States in September 11th. Well, now here we are today, allying with Saudi Arabia, again to oppose Iran. Of course, we've been longtime allies, and there's numerous other reasons for doing it, largely being oil. And lo and behold, once again, an Islamic ally has done something absolutely unthinkably horrible. They lured in a dissident journalist into their embassy in Turkey and killed him, not just killed him, dismembered him, and now nobody can find the body. I don't know what happened to that body, but I suspect it may be dissolved. Nobody's going to find it, okay? And to think that we are trying to ally and do business with a country capable of doing something like that is just outrageous. But it's going to happen to us over and over again whenever we put together a strategic plan that involves trying to ally with an Islamic nation against other Islamic nations that we think are worse.
You see, I think the thing is, people want to find a good guy, and people often say to me, "Oh, but what about Sunni or Shia? Which one is the good guy?"
And I'm like, when it comes to Islam, there is none. They follow the
That
same books, the same rules. It's exactly all the same. There is nothing good. There is no good news about this.
what,
And,
what
in Ireland, they're allowing Saudi build mosques. And I'm like, there's no free lunch.
correct.
Once you start allowing them doing that, there is a payback. And the payback is not worth it.
That's right.
Shouldn't have
Well,
any foreign investment. But
and
yeah.
mosques are not viewed like churches are. I mean, mosques in the Islamic world are not like churches in the Christian world. They are not simply houses of worship. They serve a military and judicial function as well. This is why you keep having imams issuing fatwas, doing things like calling for the death of people. Well, that's because that's how a mosque operates. We have no concept of when you let in a mosque, it is not like allowing in a church. You have just let in a force that goes beyond religious. It is governmental, and they'll do things like spy on you. They'll do things like store weapons. They'll do things like plot conquest. They'll do all sorts of things from those mosques that we naive in the West can't even imagine. But getting back to the Middle East, a really good way to think about it is like what all the conflict that's constantly going on over there, it's like a mutiny on a pirate ship. And when you see a mutiny on a pirate ship, you, that doesn't mean one of the sides is a good guy and the other side is a bad guy. They're all bad guys, and if you try to do business with any of them, like rescuing one to align with one against the other, it's only a matter of time before they will stab you in the back because that's what pirates do.
See, I suppose the whole thing is people forget that they want the world Islamic. And for
Right.
them, to kill you, they go there and they get, I used to think it was 72 virgins, but apparently somebody would correct me. It's 70 prostitutes you get from loose women and two like angel like women to like good women, but you get 70 sort of prostitutes or loose women from
Well,
hell. 70 from hell, sorry. So, for them who've living in a bad life, they've no money, la la la, this paradise sounds amazing, and all they have to do is blow themselves up and take a few of us with them. So of
right.
course it's always going to be an option and it's just dangerous. The whole ideology and bringing it in, there is nothing. The only thing we can actually do, and what should have happened years ago, it's a bit like
No,
the Crusades. We have to ban all mosques in the Western world, take them all out, close them all down, and say you're not allowed. You can come to the West, but you can leave Islam on the way, on the door in, and we don't take any any money from any Islamic countries. You don't allow them create mosques or any Islam, just totally. And I know people think that's crazy, but that is the only way. Other than that, there is going to be terrorism after terrorism. It isn't something that's going to evolve or change or
right.
anything else. It's just not going to integrate. It's not. It just can't. And that's just it.
Correct. And I think there's an underlying issue that's really important to realize, which is we are the ones who are creating this very disaster that we're witnessing. And what I mean by that is there's an old saying, money talks and BS walks. And guess
Absolutely.
we are giving so much money to, okay? Because of all the oil and natural gas in the Middle East, we have just enriched them beyond belief. And they literally see it as a sign of Islam's superiority. Because if Allah didn't favor the Muslims, why would they why would Allah give them these tremendously huge oceans of oil and natural gas that just send billions and billions and billions of dollars into their part of the world that they can now use as a way of giving thanks to Allah for all this bounty? They can now use it to spread Islam all around the world. And they do things like, I mean, our fundamental problem is they are buying off all of the people who would normally be waving the danger flag. Let me give you an example.
Absolutely.
One of the best medical universities in the entire world is known as Johns Hopkins, and it's right in Baltimore, which is about an hour away from where my wife and I live. And we go there on regular occasions for medical work. And one of the things they did is they recently put up something called the Sheikh Zayed Towers. Sheikh Zayed Towers in Baltimore? What's up with that? Well, it turned out that this is one of the Emirates in the United Arab Emirates. They donated $1 billion to that medical university.
God,
And
unbelievable.
go there, and there's a big picture of Sheikh Zayed right there on the wall. Now, do you think
Jeez.
they're going to say anything negative about Islam?
Yeah.
No way. Okay. Harvard, $20 million, created an Islamic studies program. I forget his whole name, but it's Talal. He's a part of the Saudi royal family. He's their super big billionaire. For mere $20 million, he bought off Harvard University. Same thing with Georgetown. In fact, most major universities in the United States now have an Islamic studies program, and I guarantee you that none of those universities are going to say anything bad about Islam.
No, but you're not allowed to say anything bad about Islam.
Right.
Anyway, you can say anything about anybody else, but Islam is like this protected cult, even in the UK, where they have had over a million. They don't even know real figures. Like some people are saying 2, maybe more million children gang raped. And no one's allowed to speak out about it. You have people like Tommy Robinson and,
Right.
Britain First being arrested, constantly being arrested for purely pointing out the fact that their children are being gang raped. And they're being arrested and persecuted because of those words. It's insane. Sorry.
I knew it was all over for the UK when I heard Gordon, I forget his first name, but the Prime Minister Gordon declared that London was going to become the Sharia banking capital of the West. As soon as
Their
he
prime minister.
I knew it was over, because
Cameron, you mean?
say
Was it
that
Cameron?
again?
I'm just trying to work out the Gordon Brown. Oh, okay. Did he say that? Sorry.
Yeah, it was about like 2007 time frame. He declared
Okay.
that London was going to be the Sharia banking capital of the world, or excuse me, of the West. And when
Jesus.
he said that, what that means is they are going to go all out to bring in as much Middle Eastern money into London as possible. And if they are basically betting the future of London on Sharia banking, do you think they're going to say anything negative about Islam? And when Muslims do bad things, are they going to deal with it, or are they going to shut up the people who are crying out about the injustices?
That's exactly what's happening. It's kind of scary. Like a lot of their towns now are what they call as white flight, and we're having it soon in Ireland called Irish flight, and they call it white flight. We call Irish flight, and where literally towns of the indigenous population have just left. They
Right.
just go. I was actually talking to an Englishman because there used to be Irish areas, a bit like what you have in America, but in
Mhm.
England they have Irish areas as well.
Right.
And it's where, all the Irish would, when they moved over there, they would live together and have their music and, have their culture and,
Right.
and stick very much together. And he says, it's really sad. It's one thing. And he's Iranian and he left. He was a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and he had to leave because of persecution. But he was like saying to me, it's sad. They actually miss those Irish areas because they're all gone now. And that
Right.
would have been a big part of, growing up in the UK, watching Irish areas, because I suppose they were a bit different, because they had the music and there was always some lively stuff going on in them, but they're all gone now. The Irish have left from there.
Wow. Yeah, that's devastating. So the key point is, the only way we are going, as long as we keep sending money to that part of the world, they are going to continue their Islamic expansionism, and continue buying off the politicians, buying off the universities, buying off businesses. Because if you're doing business in the, with Saudi Arabia, you think you're going to say anything negative about Islam? Consider the way right now Google is, now this is a slightly different thing. Google is coming up with a version of Google for China, which has all the features China wants, like spying on people and
Wow.
censorship. And Turkey, Erdogan, a number of years ago, was shutting down Google, Facebook, etc., Twitter, because he did not want free speech. And so what do these companies do if they want to do business in the Islamic world? They change how they do things to please the Islamic world. And once those changes are made, they're not restricted to the Islamic world. They become global. This is where the censorship of conservatives is coming from. Okay?
Yeah.
We are being censored here because these mega social network companies want to do business in oppressive parts of the world. They can't do business in oppressive parts of the world unless people like you and me are silenced. Okay?
Yeah.
So the only real solution is we have to stop enriching these people. We are creating the problem. And the way we do that is we find alternatives to Middle Eastern oil. Fortunately, in the United States, we've got something called fracking, which is changing everything. The United States has been zooming up in oil production. We are now the #1 oil producer in the entire world. We produce more oil now than Saudi Arabia or Russia. This has just happened within like the past year. And
wow.
It's going to continue
President
on.
Trump, he's amazing, man, actually.
Yes, this is one of the great things Trump is doing. He is really encouraging that, as opposed to President Obama, who did everything he could to slow it down. He couldn't stop it, but he could slow it down by opposing pipelines, for getting the oil out from where it's raised up to places where it can actually be used. Trump is really supporting the construction of pipelines, and it's revolutionizing things. And so the key point is the price of oil is gone down dramatically. Right now, the price of oil is on the order, it varies between $50 and $60 a barrel. Well, guess what? Saudi Arabia needs oil to be over $80 a barrel to break even financially. And by the way, I just did research on this morning. I was looking in the Wall Street Journal. This morning's Wall Street Journal has this. As opposed to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait needs oil to be at $47 a barrel to break even. What's the big difference between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia? The two places are right next to each other. Why does Saudi Arabia need oil to be over $80? Because that difference represents the amount of effort that Saudi Arabia is going through in trying to export Islam around the world. Okay? Kuwait's not doing that. Saudi Arabia is. All the big difference between the amount of money they need, their governments need to break even, has to do with what their governments are doing. Okay? But the good news is, if we keep oil down at like $50 a barrel, Saudi Arabia is going to go bankrupt if they keep doing what they're doing and trying to export Islam. And
how long do you think it'll be before they go bankrupt?
Well, they'll have to pull their horns in. They can easily operate their country break even at $47 a barrel if they're not trying to export Islam around the world. And that's the kind of thing we need to do. That's our strategic interest.
See, the problem, I think, is mainly with the UN. The more I look at it, because EU is breaking Europe. And that's their whole thing, to break down the nation states. And they're not even hiding it anymore. They're actually quite open, saying, the biggest crisis is that people are reluctant to give up their sovereignty of their country. I'm not joking. This is actually being said.
Let's be a little more specific. France and Germany are trying to use the EU to cudgel all the smaller nations into being into line. Basically, it's France and Germany taking over the rest of Europe.
Absolutely. But hopefully Le Pen, like apparently her polls have gone up. So
Yes.
it's France and Germany. Germany, she's been kind of she's been held in a shoestring to for hold up her party or government. But it is Germany, you're right, and France. Like even when Ireland pulled out, they Germany and France had to have a meeting together to come out with,
Exactly. They're
joined
plotting against the
thought.
rest of Europe.
Yeah. It's frightening. But you see, they seem to be part of then the UN. And then you look at the UN, majority of the countries in the UN are Islamic. And you think of the Chief Council of
Right.
Human Rights is Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Like, how the hell could that be? It's a
Right.
false bullshit organization to just bring Islam into the world under
Well,
this bullshit name of human rights because they're twisting every word on
th-
you.
there's an added point to your point that really needs to come out, which is it is the UN, but it's something more specific than that. There's something called the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And it's a 57 nation organization. It basically acts as a 57 nation Islamic voting bloc. They get together and they push the Islamic agenda as a unified force. And effectively, what they're doing at the UN is they are using the OIC, acting as a unified bloc, to redefine human rights in the Islamic image. And that's why Saudi Arabia is there. I mean, we think it's ridiculous, but the Islamic world, it's a natural. What's happened is the UN has been turned into an instrument of the Islamic agenda through the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Scary. So, what do you see the future? Do you see there has to be like a war, or do you just think like because like in some ways I'd like a war because I just think this is insane. It's better off dying free than living as a slave. It's an old Irish expression.
I,
But I
I
just see so many corruption. All the government is corrupt, and they just, before in any other time, the governments weren't all corrupt.
well, I agree with you that it's you're better off to fight than to become a slave. Okay, but I think there is an alternative, and this is one of the things I've been pushing all over the place every chance I get. So I really appreciate you, allowing me to speak to the people
Oh,
of Ireland
thank you. And
about this.
thank you for an awful
It,
lot for being here.
it's something that I call ELSI. ELSI is an acronym. It's ELSI, and that stands for Educate, Liberate, Separate, Isolate. ELSI.
Okay,
Keep that in
that's
mind.
interesting. Tell me
Ed
about that.
means educate is what we're doing right now. We're waking
Yeah.
people up. We're getting people to understand that this is a real threat. Once people are educated, they are able, through democratic institutions, they're able to take action. Now, let me back up just a little bit. This is why we are being subjected to such a heavy handed disinformation campaign. The
Yeah.
mainstream media is all in for misinforming the public about the real nature of Islam. I mean, since when has any mainstream media source talked about the true nature of Islam and the things that
Yeah.
aren't pleasant about it? They won't touch it. And big reason why, again, ultimately it comes down to Middle Eastern oil money. Okay? So that's what we are fighting against, but we are here to educate the public because the people themselves need to rise up as a democracy. Now, liberate. What liberate means is we need to liberate ourselves of our economic dependence on the Islamic world. And that's the beautiful thing we're seeing happening with fracking in the United States. The United States is rapidly moving into the position where we are going to be able to outcompete both OPEC and the Russians in energy exportation. And when that happens, I mean, right now, most of Europe feels like it's in a vice. They have to deal with Russia because they need the gas. They have to deal with the
See, the thing is, I don't see,
they need oil.
Russia seems to be like a big thing at the moment with Europe. They're talking about it,
Well,
but
sure, but
in
with
in
their
actually,
attack on the Ukraine.
yeah, but
Right.
exactly that's what I was going to say. But in reality, yes, right, there is no, what we see and the harms we're seeing in our communities and our is Islam. It's not. You don't see Russians going around gang raping children or mutilating women or female mutilation. You don't see. Russians aren't doing that. In
Well,
fact, they're very much similar to us. They, on a community scale, there is no thing. But with Islam, it's like this
right.
is unbearable. No one can live like this. Why is
Here's
the government forcing this on us?
here's the difference. Russia is a conventional threat. Russia is a threat, but it's a threat that we understand. We know that they're a threat. We know the things that they try to do, and we know how to oppose them. Whether we have the will to do it is another thing, but we can talk about it. Nobody's saying you can't say anything bad about the Russians. Oh my gosh, you Russophobe,
Yeah.
right? Nobody says that. The problem is that Islam sneaks undercover by portraying itself as a religion, and people say, oh, it's a religion, therefore we have to accept it. And that's the fundamental problem. I mean, it's so ridiculous, but people are caught in this mindset of, oh, if it's a religion, we have to accept it. Let's point out for a second how absurd that is. In Mexico, the ancient Aztecs had a religion where they demanded a human sacrifice every day to get the sun to rise. Now, if these Aztecs with their religion arrived on the doorsteps of Ireland, would everybody say, oh, well, gee, they need a human sacrifice for the sun to rise according to their religion, so, we just have to supply them with one. Otherwise we'd be disrespecting their religion. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Just because something is a religion does not mean it's above scrutiny. Okay?
I think even in Ireland, it's more. They're actually convinced it's something to do with being brown, so they think it's a culture, or and more. It's like a race. They actually do believe it's a race, and no matter how many times I tell them, look, if it goes to North Pole and there's white as whatever with blue eyes, it's not going to change. Islam is Islam, whether they're black, white, green,
Right.
or whatever, and wherever part of the globe it is, it's not going to change. Even the guy,
Well,
the president of.
and this is where we're being suckered, okay? The point is, that didn't happen by mistake. The reason Islam is being portrayed as a race, or you're a racist if you oppose Islam,
Yeah.
the reason why they do that is because they know nobody wants to be called a racist. The word racist is a weapon. Whenever somebody's doing something you don't want, call them a racist, and they'll run and hide and shut up, and that's exactly what they want. Okay? Islam is not a race. It is a religion. There are, a lot of those people who are following, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the guy's name, the crazy guy in England who just got released from prison. He was put out of prison, or put in prison for a little while, but they just released him.
Paul Golding, is it from Britain First?
No. I mean a Muslim. A Muslim
Oh, a
guy.
Muslim. Oh, God. Sadat. I know that guy, that hate speech, or that lunatic. Oh, God, I can't think of his name either.
But anyway, the point is, he is obviously dangerous, but he has a number of followers who are British. They're as white as you and me. How can it
Oh,
be
absolutely.
to oppose Islam when all these Muslims are white? It's
There is
again,
a thing with England and Ireland and a lot of Europe. They
they
actually
don't want
hate.
think, they
Is
don't want people to think critically. They want people to be driven by fear. They are bullying you into compliance, and this is where we have to say, stop. What you're saying makes no sense, and if you scream it louder, I'm just going to scream right back at you just as loud, because what you are saying is crazy. Okay? To call Islam to treat Islam like a race is literally crazy.
absolutely. But the leftists, I don't know whether a lot of them I do actually think are paid by Brussels, being paid by different people. So they're quite happy. They same as the government. The Irish government are being paid by Brussels. So, they know once this country is destroyed that they all have a job in Brussels, a quite cushy job. And because Leo's not even really Irish, he's half Indian, and I think his real alliance is to Italy or to India. It's not to Ireland at all. I mean, in fact, in a lot of his speech, you can hear he absolutely detests the Irish.
Wow.
He has no respect for them. Like he said things like, "Oh, 1 in 6 in Ireland aren't born in Ireland, and it's much better that there's so many immigrants coming in because they work harder and they pay taxes." You can actually, he doesn't even hide his distaste for the Irish, because I suppose because he's not truly Irish, and he's not, of Irish culture or heritage, um, or skin, so he just looks and he just wants it all destroyed, because I suppose maybe he felt uncomfortable being Irish, because I suppose when he was growing up in Ireland, people would have said, "No, you're not Irish. Where are you from?" And they still do that,
Right.
but that's what they're trying to get rid of. That there
Right.
isn't an actual look or an identity, and
Right.
that's why he wants to destroy it. He hates it. He hates
Well,
Ireland.
well, they're no, they like identity politics. It's just they want different identity politics. They don't want identity politics based on, well, you're Irish, right? They don't like that identity. They like
No,
identity like being Muslim. They like
yeah,
identity like being a minority. Okay,
like
um, whatever.
LGB, yeah,
Right. They like identities like being LGBT, like you said. And so it's not that
African,
they don't
yeah,
like identity politics. They just want to do their own identity politics, and they want to destroy your identity. Okay.
yeah,
Now, there's one other point. You talked about Brussels. You're right, but let me take it one step further. Okay. I mean, there's
okay,
always been corruption, but the question is, why would people operate against their own national best interests? And for
yeah,
that, you have to follow the money. And again, I say that if you look at the crazy things going on in Brussels and you were able to follow the money, you would find that that money leads to the oil-rich Middle East. Okay,
yeah.
or places like Russia. I mean, I'm sure Putin is not
It's
above driving.
mainly sorrows and
Okay,
people like that it leads to.
right. Okay, but the idea is always follow the money. When people do things that don't make sense, follow the money.
Absolutely. It's crazy. Like the abortion came into Ireland like on such an extreme, and that
Right.
was sorrows. Like there's just such underhanding going on. So I hear President Trump, he's trying to cut down abortion, or what's he doing with that? I heard that there's certain states that are now abortion, once they hear the heartbeat, is illegal.
Well, on the subject of abortion, that is a real third rail. I don't know if people in Ireland understand what the concept of a third rail is. When I say third rail, do you know what I mean? Okay,
Off railing, is it?
on,
Or,
on electric trains in the subways in the big cities, there's a third rail. The third rail is the one that carries the electricity. And if you
okay.
step on the third rail, which is in between the two rails that the wheels are on, you electrocute yourself. Okay.
Okay.
So abortion is sort of the third rail political issue, and nobody wants to deal with it directly
Mm,
because the feelings are so strong on it. What
yeah.
Trump is trying to do is nominate conservative judges because what we have the ability, or he has the ability to do, is appoint judges that then have to be confirmed by the Senate, and that's why it was so important that in these midterms, despite what you might have heard in the mainstream media, Trump did not lose out in the midterms. Okay, we lost the House. That is, conservatives lost control of the House, but the Senate is actually strengthened. You need 50 to have a majority. because the vice president can vote with the conservatives also, and that would tip any tie over in favor of conservatives. We went from 51 before the election to 53. We now have 53 Republicans in the Senate. And so with that strengthened hand, it's going to be even easier for President Trump to appoint conservative judges with the consent of the Senate than it was before the election. So that was a big victory.
Okay,
And
that's good. Yeah, we certainly didn't hear that. That's good.
it's the judges who ultimately will decide on the abortion issue. And, that's sort of a big underlying issue. Nobody's going to talk about it. But in reality, if a bunch of conservative judges get appointed, you're going to see the laws on abortion become more conservative. I'm not saying that they're going to make abortion illegal, but the rules are going to get tightened quite a bit. Okay.
Well, I think in this day and age, they should be tightened, to be honest. I don't actually think, like, when America and England brought in abortion, there
Right.
was a reason and it was their need. But with medical advancements, there isn't actually a need for it.
Well,
Babies now survive outside the womb at 20 weeks.
right. Well,
So,
and it's not just a matter of a medical matter. It's also a matter of adoption. I mean, there are so many people who would love to adopt children. I'm speaking of this as a person who my wife couldn't have kids. Well, we
yeah.
wanted to adopt, but the adoption laws were just brutal in Delaware. And long story short, it ended up falling through, and we didn't do it. If we had more encouraging adoption laws instead of
Hmm.
abortion, if somebody doesn't want to keep their child, let it be adopted. I mean, the whole
Well,
idea.
actually, I was talking about that the other night. I'll give you a quick kind of thing. I won't go too long, but because it's just come into Ireland and it's going to be the most barbaric and whatever. But I
Yeah.
was saying what they should do is now that we should pay women to stay pregnant, women who are going for abortion. It sounds kind of crazy, but after 20 weeks, we can pay them up for how long, whenever they want to. After 20 weeks, the minimum we pay is 2 weeks. And then um, once they want to opt out, they can opt out at any time and have a C-section. Because this thing of, again,
Right.
it's about
By the way,
education.
we're aborting our way to extinction. The whole reason why
Yeah.
Europe has a population problem is because Europe is systematically aborting its way to extinction.
Yeah. It's just crazy. It's just the leftist again. I mean, the abortion thing could have easily been solved. Like, they could for these things, like pay. Because people think that this is a magic pill and that suddenly you become unpregnant. You don't.
Right.
The baby has to come out anyway. What different, you've just become a mother that's killed her child. That's all you are. It doesn't have, it's magic and you become unpregnant. And
Right.
all these words again, it's just another issue with them. But back to Islam, where do you see all this going, and where, like, the world just seems to be split and divide and conquer is all I can
Right.
explain what's going on.
What I would say on that is we're heading to a crisis. Okay, I don't know exactly what that crisis is going to look like. I don't know where it's going to start, and I don't know where it's going to end. But what I can definitely say is the best way to minimize the crisis, if we can't avoid it completely, is, like I said, ELSI: educate, liberate, separate, isolate. And the last two things is separate, meaning we have got to shut down transportation from the Islamic world of Muslims to the rest of the world. Okay, because these guys are indoctrinated with a political mindset and they carry that with them wherever they go. You've got to shut down. I mean, it was disastrous to see all these so-called Syrian refugees move into Europe. Europe is going to regret that. That was like the
Well, they
single
already have. It's
they
the
could
main
do.
media. The amount of
They're
mass gang
starting.
rapes and murders, like, it's horrible. Nobody can live like, and even in Ireland, nobody thought it would happen here. It's horrible, worse than horrible.
It's just
It's like,
It's just getting started. Fortunately, some of the European countries are smart enough to head this off at the pass. They are doing what I call ELSI: educate, liberate, separate, isolate. okay? But Germany has set itself up for disaster. I don't know exactly how or where it's going to go, but there's going to become a certain point where there's going to be a civil war between the Islamists who are there and their allies, because leftists who just hate
Yeah.
themselves or their own cultures are going to ally with anything that
Yeah.
seeks to tear down their own country. And the people who love their countries and love their way of living and want to continue with that. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I guarantee you it's going to happen in some form or another. Some countries will avoid it, like Poland, for example. I think they've done a lot
Hmm.
to avoid
Yeah.
the whole thing. There's what is it? I think Austria is trying to avoid it. There's
Austria, yeah. They
okay,
got a new leader.
right,
Hungary is a fantastic leader. He's a bit
right,
like President Trump. He's amazing. Czech
right,
Republic are not entering into it either. Croatia are not entering into it. Any of the Eastern
right,
European countries who've been in war,
right.
absolutely aren't entering into it.
Irish people need to ask themselves is, do they want to be one of the countries that witness these disasters unfold, or do they want to be one of the countries where these disasters are going to unfold? Because Ireland has not been infiltrated the way France and Germany have. You still have a choice, okay?
Yeah.
And
But unfortunately,
only the
the
people
Irish
who are in charge
have
are.
no idea. Like the Irish, the main media is all owned by this guy called Dennis O'Brien, and he is a complete liberal, and so that's all the news they get. Majority of Ireland, when the government and the media says jump to your left, that's all they know, and that's what they hear, and they're completely brainwashed. There is I am a minority in this country. There's very few of us who are actually awake and going, "Oh my God!" And actually, people think we're crazy talking out. They think that this is crazy. That that we're I don't
Well,
know, exaggerating or, that we're causing trouble or these sort of things, but they don't actually believe us, unfortunately. And it'll have to come to where Irish are literally dying before they'll wake up. And I do think that's happening soon. As I said, like, they burnt down that, the Irish themselves burnt down the centre. You
wow,
will see the Irish fighting back,
right,
but at the moment, the leftist media is like, look, bunch of racists. And they went to another town where they just shoved in
hmm,
more without asking the people, ruined the village and put them in. And they went around and they asked the people and they said, look, I'm scared. I have daughters. I have a wife. I have children. They have to walk through this town. They're not going to be able to walk through. We're going to have to move out. We're going to have to close our business.
right.
We can't live like this. I have children and my children go to the discos, local discos. This is their life. I can't ask them not to go, and I can't be around when they're walking past this area. You've put in mainly males, Muslim males, coming from an ideology and they knew, like a lot of Irish go, oh yeah, we're in for all this sort of thing. But once you put it in their backyard, then they're
Right.
like suddenly change their mind, going, yeah, that's all fine in theory, but just don't put it in my town or in my yard. I have children, I have a wife, I have a family. I don't want this for them.
Well, you hit an important nail on the head. Okay, most people are not paying attention until something lands in their own backyard. And so my message to the Irish is, you know, you don't have to watch the telly. Okay, get on the internet, get your news, make sure you get your news from multiple sources, not just one. Because if you're trusting one source only, you just set yourself up to be propagandized. I think, what's coming in the other parts of Europe, I think it's going to happen elsewhere before it happens to Ireland. But the people of Ireland need to be paying attention, watching the news, watch the fires burning in France, okay? Why, read the news about all the rapes happening and murders happening in Germany, and
They
say,
don't hear any of that, Dave,
just
to be
whether
honest with
you
you.
want that and where you are or not. Okay, but whatever you do, don't kindly tend your garden in your backyard and trust your government to do right for you. We've got a great saying for that in the United States. Okay, which is, yeah, the government's always looking out for you. Just ask any Indian.
That's a very good. They're not allowed to be called Indian anymore. They're Native Americans, aren't they?
Well, it's an old joke.
Yeah, but it's a good expression actually. But yeah, listen, Dave, you've been fantastic, and I will keep in touch, and maybe in about a week or so, or I'll give you a call on the Bon Ree Show on ITV.ie and Irish News Radio, and we'll find out what's been happening in America. It was great to talk to you and find out what's happening over the sea. America, I've always loved. You know, I always wanted to live there, and maybe one day with this country going, I might just take a plane ticket and just disappear to America.
Well, if you want to, please come over. We love having visitors.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. Thank you for being on the show, on the Bon Ree Show. Thank you, Dave. We'll talk to you in about a week, okay?
Looking forward.
And keep in touch. Thank you very much.
You are listening to Irish News Radio and irishnews.net. Email news@irishnews.net.